Good day. I am Roy Williams, the Director General of the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service. Today I am joined by the new head of the United Nations Development Program, Mr. Magdy Martinez Soliman, who will tell us something about the United Nations Development Program and tell us something about himself and why he is here in the Federation. Mr. Soliman, good day.
Good day to you, Roy.
Right. You have a Spanish name, you know. It's Martinez Soliman. Your Spanish background.
Yes. Dad is Spanish, and my mother is Egyptian. Mm-hmm. So that explains the Soliman.
Okay. And the Martinez is the Spanish part of it.
Indeed.
Okay. Now, Mr. Martinez Soliman, what are you doing in the Federation? What brings you here?
Well, the first and foremost purpose is to be invited to present letters of credence to the Honorable Prime Minister tomorrow. I will thereby start formally my assignment in St. Kitts and Nevis, being duly acknowledged as the representative of the UN's development program, and start coming more frequently, I hope, to give some impetus to the programs that we have here in collaboration with the government.
Right.
And then, of course, I'm also here to join the celebrations of independence, which are a good reason to come and join my fellow diplomats who have been coming as a flock to St. Kitts to be in the parade and in the events that will honor the day for the country.
Certainly. Now, this position that you have newly taken up, you have your office in Barbados, and of course you're responsible for the OECS, which is the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, which of course brings full responsibility over the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Could you tell us something about your role in terms of heading this UNDP office and what your role entails?
Yes, when I took up the assignment, the job description said, based in Barbados with frequent travel. And that was already an indication that I would have, and with great pleasure, I would then travel frequently to the other countries to see what we do there and to give it some support. My responsibility covers the OECS, as you have said, so the 7 countries and the 3 overseas territories in the Eastern Caribbean. Regrettably, our work has been marked by the hurricanes. We do a lot of recovery work, so you wouldn't be surprised if I told you that our 2 largest offices right now are on Antigua to support the Barbuda recovery, and on Dominica to help the government there recover from the hurricanes of 2017. But then we do lots of other things. The UN Development Program is a fairly large UN agency. We work on governance, we work with the police, we work with the judges, we work with the public administration, we work on climate. I have been seeing our projects here on island. I just met the Minister of Agriculture. We're working with the rangers, with the national parks. We try to support people who want to beautify their country, preserve their natural resources, have them ready for nationals and tourists alike to visit and enjoy them. We do a lot of environmental work, and we are the foremost agency that fights against poverty. So we have a big social component in what we do. And from that perspective, I have to say that St. Kitts has been doing quite well. St. Kitts and Nevis have been doing quite well.
In particular, how has the UNDP worked along with St. Kitts and Nevis? What has it done in the past?
It's a long relationship. It is as long as St. Kitts and Nevis have been independent. Your country very soon signed up to the legal instruments that allowed us to be a partner to you. We started working on what was the call of the day then, macroeconomic planning and development economics. And soon we came along as a climate partner, as a climate action partner, so very much on the environment. And nowadays, it's turning more, it's veering towards what we call the blue economy. So it is about realizing the assets of the ocean. It is about the blue tourism. It is about being more sustainable in the way we use our resources. It is about banning single-use plastics. It's about diversifying the economy so that we, our societies, allow me to include myself as I am now a happy resident in the Caribbean, we do not depend exclusively on tourism. Look, my country is a very touristic country, the second touristic country of the world. We receive every year 85 million people. And if you had an economy only based on that, you are at the whim of a bad season, of an economic recession, of problems with law and order, anything that will frighten tourists. And tourists have quick feet. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of offer out there, and they will take another place, they will go somewhere else if they think that they're not going to enjoy their time in the place where they're thinking to go in the first
There are many
place.
exogenous factors. We call them factors that come from outside. But at the very same time, what you mentioned is a very good thing, because a lot of our livelihood depends upon the sea and fishermen, and so on. But of course, you also mentioned the ban of single-use plastics. And there has been this drive here, especially by the Ministry of Tourism and the St. Kitts Tourism Authority, to ban single-use plastics because we recognize the danger that it poses to marine life, and we recognize as well the detriment it could have on our tourism sector in terms of the ugliness, the unsightliness of it on our beaches, and all of that sort of thing.
But
so there is this drive towards banning single-use
direction.
plastics.
But see, Mr. Williams, we have progressed a lot. 10 years ago, this would not have been a conversation. We would have said, well, how can you... We would have talked about the economic impact. We would have had the owners of supermarkets up in arms, the producers, the people who deliver these plastic items would have talked about losses and damage. Mm-hmm. Today, they want to look good too. They want to produce sturdier plastic that can have multiple uses. The supermarkets would like to be seen as eco-friendly. They don't want to be lumped into those who don't care about the environment. And so there's an awareness, there's a conscience, there's almost an activism that exists today because, as simple as that, we want to leave a beautiful planet and a blue economy to our children. Mm-hmm. And we want to live today, because our livelihoods depend on that, as you rightly said, we want to live today a prosperous life, mm-hmm. Sponsored and boosted by tourists who will come to us and will feel good, will like to come and will come again.
Yes.
And that requires no bad plastic straws, no bad plastic bags. And
styrofoam as well. Let's not forget styrofoam.
It is a battle across the board. And it starts with ourselves, it starts with our habits as consumers, and it goes all the way to the highest levels of public policy. We're here to help, to support, to showcase also what has worked and what hasn't in other places. We have been working with Barbados' Ministry of the Blue Economy on the plastic ban. Mm-hmm. And some augured that it would be a catastrophe. Hasn't been.
We have not banned it here, but I suspect that at some point we are going to move in that direction. It always amazes me because when I go to the supermarket, the bread is already in plastic, and then they give me 2 plastic bags to put the bread in that is already in plastic. It doesn't make sense. And I believe it's because the plastic is cheap.
Yes. And that's one of the reasons, but also because we get used to this utilization for a very short period and throwing away, the Kleenex syndrome. Mm-hmm. You know, you use the tissue, you throw it away. But
sometimes without even consideration for where you're throwing it.
That's even worse. Right. Even worse. You were talking about the fishermen before. There's a whole debate about fishing nets, broken fishing nets, in the sea, damaging the biggest of our fish out there, hurting them, killing them. in general, we have been quite rough and quite gross in the way we have treated our waters. We have polluted them. We have thrown the grey waters into them with disregard of marine pollution. We have thrown industry reject and refuse in them. We have used it as a dumping ground as if we wouldn't hurt the sea. We are actually damaging it. We're actually making it a dirt pond. And instead of that, what is the Caribbean known for? Pristine turquoise waters with palm trees and golden sand beaches. And that is the postcard offer that is actually very real. And people come for that year and year around the clock. They come time and time again to your shores. I think that it's the old story of not killing the goose with the golden eggs. And in this case, it's
throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. Right. Now, you are very passionate about what you do. If you can tell us something about where your career has taken you, and tell us something about your background and your accomplishments.
I will give you a short gist of where I've been. But let me first say that of course the United Nations have allowed me to live in many places, so I'm absolutely thankful to the organization for that opportunity. I didn't start as a young professional in the UN. I haven't come up the ranks, so to speak. I'm a lawyer by training, so I started in private practice. I was a barrister. I taught law in my university, my alma mater. And then I went into public service. I went into government in my country, in Spain. And after a while, there was a possibility to do a stint in Africa, country that was at war. I learned it the hard way. I went there. We worked on a reconciliation program between those who were the guerrilla there and those who were the government. I started liking that way of life and that ideal of doing good, but in a very practical manner. It was tough on the family because you had to live abroad in many occasions in non-family duty stations, as we call it, so separated from wife and children. But I went along, and the next posting was in Asia, in the south of Asia, in Bangladesh, close to India. We had there a very, very large office. It's now been in the news because it has generously hosted the Rohingya, the refugees from Myanmar. From there, I went back to Africa, West Africa, worked in Senegal, and then a couple of tours of duty in New York. Finally, a posting in Mexico City, with responsibilities for the whole UN. And my last postings have been in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago first, and Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean now. So I wouldn't say that it's a decade. It is a decade, 2-decade-long career, but a career that has been varied and challenging and interesting every day.
Challenging. What is challenging about it?
Well, sometimes you have to speak truth to power. You have to tell the political leaders that something is not going too well in their countries and that they need to. They tend to listen to the UN because we have no agenda other than helping them. We give them crude facts. Sometimes I was mentioning in the conversation before the interview, that's right, that we had good facts to speak about in St. Kitts and Nevis. Let me give you one that is absolutely wonderful. You have the lowest child mortality of the region. Isn't that a wonderful fact to crunch?
That is excellent.
To say that children here are less affected by illnesses, less affected by lethal situations, and live healthier and longer lives than in other places where they have perhaps not as good health attention, or not as good a nutrition, or not as good a care by their parents or by government authorities. So we use those facts to trigger a policy response. Should I say that here we were very worried about the law and order situation, but it has considerably improved over the past year.
Could you say that again?
We had very bad figures in terms of criminal activity in St. Kitts and Nevis. And that has been happening until last year. Last year, the trend started to improve. And over the past 9 months, we have had a clear reduction in serious crime, murders in particular, and therefore a clear reduction of the trend of increase of the carcerary population.
So something good is happening.
Something good is happening. Somebody is doing things okay. Somebody is getting the policy right. And somebody in the police is doing their job right as well.
Law enforcement.
Yes. We will be tomorrow in an event organized by a UNDP project that is supported by our American friends of the United States Aid Agency. The Honorable Prime Minister will speak there. We will be talking about the improvement of the situation of law and order and law enforcement on St. Kitts and Nevis. It's something that is worth mentioning. Of course, there's many other things we could talk about. For instance, let me give you a not so rosy fact. In your country, you have fewer older folks having a pension than almost anywhere around. In Grenada, in Antigua, in Barbados, in Trinidad, there are more pensioners, more retirees with a pension than here. Something has happened there. Either they were uninsured, it's not that they weren't working, it's that they were working uninsured, is that the pension scheme didn't kick in, is that they didn't work long enough, or their jobs were precarious and they shifted from one employment to the next, but they didn't secure their pension rights. Something can be done about it. So that's what I hope to be discussing over the coming days with the authorities.
Right, and you must recognize as well that we have a very young population.
Indeed.
Extremely young.
Which is, as we say, it's a
Which
bonus.
Is people under 35.
It is a blessing if you manage it well, but it is a time bomb if you don't manage it well. Young people will be a tremendous boost to the economy, to the creativity, to the innovation, to the energy of a country. They will add their strength and their capacity to the economy, the arts, everything that makes life worth living. But if you do not provide them with opportunity, if there are no jobs, if there's no good education, they will sit idle.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It's a recipe for disaster. It ends up being a source of disgruntled migration or crime.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we have.
What program does the UNDP have for the youth?
We work on youth from a sustainable development perspective. We would work more on vocational training or on creating the opportunities for young entrepreneurship and startups. For instance, we were talking the other day about the possibility of increasing the rangers, the park rangers in the country. Well, that's an employment opportunity. We're talking about boosting the blue economy and the wealth that comes with it, for instance, in harnessing and harvesting the oceans as a resource. There's not a lot in terms of piscifactories or fishing farms on the island. It's starting. That is another source of employment that will naturally be reaped by young workers, young employees. So we try to support growth in the economy as a means towards the end of having more people employed and employed with quality jobs.
Right. I know there's an emphasis been placed on TVET training, technical vocational educational training for young people, that they can acquire more technical skills. For example, to be a carpenter, to be a mechanic, hands-on, because not everyone is academically. When I say academic, I mean, to be a lawyer or a doctor or things like that. Some people are more mechanically inclined and technically inclined.
And I come from a generation in my country that where everybody wanted to have a higher degree. Everyone wanted to be a lawyer, a doctor, an architect, or an engineer. And in particular, in my trade, legal studies.
In your country, a priest.
Yes, we would have quite a few of those as well. But they have no problem of employment. If you have the vocation, there will be a parish for you.
Right.
Not quite the same for lawyers. We have way too many of my age in my country, and there weren't jobs for all of them. Whereas we had a tremendous inflation in prices and a lot of demand with no supply of the kind of professions that you were talking about. They're perfectly dignified and very well paid. So no carpenters, no plumbers, no electricians, and we have a huge construction industry, a huge construction sector. We need it for our tourism, we need it for our growth, for our cities, for our residential, for our commercial. The thought kicked in soon enough that actually going for legal studies was not going to give you a job, whereas going for vocational training was most probably going to give you a good employment.
If you were a plumber, for example.
And people have just seen the light. And I do understand the impulse, for instance, of my parents, whose dearest wish was to see their children having a higher education degree. I do understand that. But at the same time, the economy is cruel and is not like that. There will be a very select number of jobs for people who have a higher education degree, and you end up with people who are lawyers but who are having to do menial jobs and are not trained for those in other kinds of companies just because they didn't study the right thing at the right time. So
you are so correct.
I think it's a reality check.
Good. Now, as we celebrate our 36th anniversary of independence, we're still a very young country.
The youngest of the Western Hemisphere.
Yes. What message would you have for St. Kitts and Nevis?
First message would be proud of what you have achieved. I have a bird's view over the region. I can see other countries that are struggling with very difficult issues. I would like to say the effort that you and your government have put into reducing your debt, into paying off your debt, into not being saddled and crushed under your debt, is something that is absolutely unique. And you are now, I know that it's a technocratic term, but you are under 60% of GDP of debt, which is the international recommended benchmark. That means people will understand me if I say that if you owed everything you earned in 1 year and you managed to reduce in a very short period of time that debt to the half, your repayment is now much easier, your repayment is now much softer, and you can afford to do other things. The other day I was touring the island, and I was touring the island on a pretty nice, recently re-asphalted highway.
Yeah.
Well,
that's right.
There's still work. It's work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
There's parts that still need to be finished, but there's parts that are brand new. And frankly, that is good for everybody. That's good for the milkman, and for the postman, and for the school bus, and for the citizen on the street who has to go to work. So, first thing, be proud of what you have achieved. Second, persevere. It's like the bicycle. If you stop pedaling, you come to a standstill and you fall down. So you need to keep on the cruise speed. You need to keep pedaling, keep plowing ahead. And in particular, you have such a beautiful country. Keep it pristine. Keep it pristine because it's not only the morally, ethically, ecologically right thing to do. It is the smart thing to do from the point of view of smart economics. That is what will protect your jobs. That is what will protect your economy. That is what will protect your country.
Mr. Martinez Solomon,
Mr. Williams,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
And all the best in taking up this new post.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good.
Okay.